So, good evening. I'm Charles Schultz, and this is the Randomizer. And tonight's term is going to be hearables. Now, hearables is an interesting term. It's a neologism made up of two words, wearable and headphone. So, a hearable is pretty obvious when you think about it in those terms. But we're going to look at what it actually is all about. There's a lot of potential here and many different systems available, and they have a lot more built in than you might imagine would fit in the canal of your ear. So, right off the bat, I'm in our Schultz Laboratories virtual Mars room. If you do go to the Universe Science Center and visit the solar systems room, you can go to Mars and you can click on some of the indicators floating over the planet. If you're in orbit around Mars in our Mars room and you click the planet, signs will appear all around the globe and they'll show you all of the existing landers and rovers and some of the crashed ones. And if you click on the green signs, you can go down to the surface. And so we're standing on the surface that Curiosity, the Mars Science Lander, had imaged. And so that's the backdrop behind us. It's a model of one of the Curiosity sites. So be sure to go to the Virtual Science Center, the universesciencecenter.com and schultzlaboratories.com. Either site will take you there. And visit, walk around, move around in our virtual worlds and experience some of our interactives. I think you'll find it's a lot of fun. Become a member of Schultz Labs and help us fund the development and furtherance of this effort to bring education to just about everybody on the planet that get on the internet. Also, the randomizer is on, as you know, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every weekday. Join us live at 6 p.m. and you'll be able to ask questions and make statements and give your opinions. And just join us in live conversation about the subject matter. We pull a random subject out of the hat every day, every weekday, and present it that evening. Also, we have our robotics classes on Mondays. Lesson 2 is concluded. Lesson 3 will be starting Monday. And come in at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a great class. If you're not there, you're missing a lot of fun and a lot of interesting educational material. So let's move on to wearables. Now, a lot of people know what headphones are or earbuds. Hearables are smart headphones or earbuds, and typically they're small enough to remain completely inside your ear. So they're very tiny. And the first question you might ask is, well, okay, there's earbuds. What's so great about these hearables? And sometimes they're for health purposes. Many of them have a lot of sensors built in, which we'll get into. The others for just other purposes, command, control, hearing music, whatever. But what a lot of people miss about hearables is the following. Suppose you have a system and it is meant to share information based on certain parameters, proximity, for instance. Hearables can contain biometric sensors, pulse rate, breathing, blood oxygen, EEG. They can contain proximity sensors. So this tiny device that you put in your ear like a little earphone can actually determine a lot of things about you and your state of health and the environment that you're in. So let's imagine that you have a shopping center or a mall or a museum or a medical facility, and people are wandering around in there. With voice command, you can tell the system that you want to be notified about certain things, and the building that you're in can then give you information. Standing to the left is an exhibit of a dinosaur, or if you go to the right, you can find the restrooms, or by the way, in this area, these things are prohibited. And so you can get a lot of information, and this is particularly valuable for people who are sight impaired or hearing impaired if these are used in combination with other technologies. It can easily give you access to information that you otherwise might miss. So a hearable can do a number of things for you. And so let's think about it. When did the term appear? It was first present in April of 2014, and it was developed independently by Apple Corporation and an inventor who was working on headset, earbud type things. The parts of a hearable typically include Number one, the speakers themselves, and they're generally very tiny rare earth magnet earphones or tiny little speakers that fit in your ear, something to make some sound. And then number two, they have a Bluetooth chip or some other system for communication. And Bluetooth is a standard because it's extremely cheap, extremely available. It doesn't take a lot of power. Number three, sensors of all sorts can also fit inside a hearable. So you can imagine not only a microphone in there, but as I mentioned, you can get blood pressure, oxygen levels, pulse rates. You can get things like your respiration rate in some cases. And there have been test units made that have electroencephalograms built in. So imagine how tiny those instruments have to be functional. They also have inertial navigation, so you can determine your orientation if you're looking up, laying on the ground, heads turned in some direction. And GPS sensing is also available for some. So you literally can find out as much with a hearable, if not more, than you can with a lot of decent cell phones. And the other thing, finally, number four, the microphone in this thing. Microphones are good for a number of purposes, and generally they're used for commands. So you actually could give voice commands through a hearable. You can connect with a digital assistant, and that can allow you an interface to other systems, such as I mentioned, a building that has a specific set of information built in. So you go into a building, you actually can get the directory right in your earphone without having to have a phone, a computer, or any other device. And by the way, some of the later ones, the Vinci units in particular, have dual core processors built in. So again, imagine just how tiny these devices have to have that sort of functionality. The only issue is some of them have battery life problems if you have a lot of functions running simultaneously, which was not unreasonable. It generally can run on a cell about the size of a hearing aid battery. And normally you have to have some sort of a charger or replace your batteries eventually. But for many, I've seen systems that use the wireless charging. So you simply drop the earbuds, the hearables themselves, onto a plate and they charge wirelessly and use renewable batteries. So a hearable can be very, very helpful in a lot of situations. I know that a lot of people who work in emergency services find these to be excellent, useful devices. So if you think about the fact that people who, let's say firefighters, are in a building and they lose sight of what's going on, hearables can actually give them an option for communicating with people outside the building or at other parts that are in danger and navigating around places where it's impossible to see. Now, one of the recent projects I saw was a complete fireman's visor that gave them what was known as transparency through fog, smoke, and other irritants and chemicals that would obscure. For instance, if you're in a dark area and there's a chemical leak in the air, you need to be able to see what's going on. Some of the systems that you normally carry in a device about the size of a cell phone would actually give you a visor view through the smoke of heat, people on the other sides of walls, and other resources that you needed to know about, such as the presence of a hookup for a fire spigot. So now when you combine hearables with this sort of headset display, you basically gain the ability to see through smoke, haze, fire, through walls in many cases. You can spot live power lines. Many years ago, I worked on a project in defense called DSU-15. And what this was sub-millimeter wave radar that allowed you to see through smoke and fog very easily. Well, this is now a very common technology in defensive systems, and it's beginning to appear in a lot of, civilian applications. There are devices now that can be interfaced with a headset such as this that allow you to scan a device over, let's say, a sensor of some sort, scan it, get the information right in your ear, and very inobtrusively see what's happening. In many cases, people can perform credit card transactions with nothing more than a device about the size of a cell phone, and the whole transaction can happen in your ear, more or less. So, hearables give you the opportunity to expand your senses into an almost superhuman range and to get into a flow of data that you normally wouldn't have access to. Now, when you get down to the voice control, everybody knows about Siri or Alexa or any number of the other voice controlled systems. What hearables also allow you is not only access to these sorts of voice controlled assistants, but also to custom tailor things for specific applications. So in many cases, people who are sight impaired or just outright blind have a tough time getting around in many circumstances, particularly if there's a lot of vehicle traffic, complex objects in the way. A hearable actually gives them the ability to navigate fully as if they have a map in their head. So this is an extension of the senses. It's very useful for people who have an impairment of any sort. It also means that in the short haul, you can often establish communications between two, three, or four people who are using a local network. So if one of the people is carrying essentially some sort of Bluetooth device in their pocket, like a cell phone, and it's connected to a number of hearables, they all have a channel to speak and be heard over this private network. This is a very interesting application as well. You can have three or four people working in coordination with no device on them whatsoever except what's in their ear. Now, when you stop and think about how much good this can do in the world, it's actually pretty amazing. It allows people to work in coordination in circumstances right off the cuff without any pre-planning. So hearables have a lot of possible extensions because sensors are getting much smaller and the technology is becoming less power hungry. It means in the near future we're going to have a lot more information that can be gotten literally in your ear and shared with your data systems. And if you have a health issue, they can detect and notify. So this is an emergency service that can exist that you might not have even considered possible before. Many people who have infirmities and stay at home alone a lot of the time have in the past depended on things like the life alerts or the little bracelets you pull the tab or you hit a button somewhere, you fall and you're injured. Well, with a hearable, you literally can be connected to the system at all times and say some code word that immediately sets the thing off. Also, it's been known recently that if a person has something like epilepsy, some of those signatures can be read, and if their position changes to prone or some unusual movement occurs suddenly, the motion sensors in the hearable can detect this and then immediately send a notification to an emergency service. Now, a lot of people, of course, will say, well, there are a lot of privacy issues involved here. And yes, that's true. The fact of the matter is, if you carry a cell phone, you're pretty much connected to everything in the world already. So privacy issues are truly something that is very difficult to get around when you're in a world in which everything is networked together. I don't see an easy solution for that. But if you're in a situation where your health or a lack of a sense could be a real issue, then a hearable can be a real positive attribute. And also, if you were a business owner, I can see opportunities to take advantage of people who are using this technology. You can actually use it with its proximity sensing mode to detect when somebody is near a sales bin and give them a notification. So, yeah, you're going to get ads in your ears all the time, even when you're not listening to YouTube. But the fact is, these technologies have a lot of potential for good. And you can't just stop using technology in our world. It's become something that everybody uses as a go-to. Today, if you didn't have contactless credit cards, I think that some transactions would be a little more difficult. And using two-factor authentication is another thing. And a lot of people aren't familiar with what that is. Many times today, if you have an account, such as a Gmail account or a YouTube account or an account with a business, they often require that you use more than a single channel of communication to verify your identity. Well, in many cases, two-factor identification is used. So you will log into your account on a computer, and then it'll say, well, you haven't used this device before. Let's log in on something else, or I'll send you a message to an email that only you would know, and if you respond, then we'll say you're good. So normally it will be a cell phone and your computer, or some simple combination such as this. So using a hearable allows you to add that two-factor authentication so that if you're using your cell phone and your hearable, perhaps that will be enough to verify your identity. And biometrics can also be included. So if somebody takes your earphone and tries to use it, in many cases it's a custom fit and that won't happen, or the biometrics can be checked and they won't match. So it's almost like a fingerprint or a thumbprint. So biometrics, as you know, aren't always 100% accurate, but it does give you at least some degree of better security. So hearables are the new subject here. Hearables are something that allows you access to information that's invisible and intangible, but it'll be right in your ear when you need it. So if anybody has any questions about the technology, and if you also want to make any suggestions, the floor is open. Meanwhile, I'm going to remind you to go to the universesciencecenter.com or schultzlaboratories.com and visit our pages, visit our galleries, and if, by the way, you're an educator and you wish to share something you know with the world, we can set you up with a virtual gallery to display your works or a virtual classroom where you can teach people all over the world. So this is something that if you're interested in, we're happy to do. Contact us at schultzlaboratories.com. And I can post an email address for you right here on screen, and you can contact us there if you wish. Admin@schultzlaboratories.com is the place to do it. So, no questions have appeared. Nobody's texted anything or said anything. I'm going to assume that we're good, and I'm going to wrap it up. So my quote for today, if nobody has anything to say, is, "Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be the glory in the church by Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen." And that is Ephesians, and it's 3:20 and 21. So if anybody wants to say anything, this is your last chance, and then I'm going to wrap it up and call it a success. So I don't see any messages coming in. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching the Randomizer. I hope that you tune in tomorrow for our next one where we pull another random subject out of the ether. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. And as usual, make the world a better place. Thank you. I'm Charles Schultz.